Yeah.
Thank you. There's a bill now in the House and called H.R. 450, and if it reaches the Senate, I'd like to know if you would support it. It's called the Enumerated Powers Act, and to require Congress to specify the source of authority under the Constitution for the enactment of any law.
Well, absolutely, because most of the laws that we enact are unconstitutional. So I don't know what source they're going to cite. They might cite the Commerce Clause, but I mean, that's just a clause that's totally perverted. I mean, basically, there's a clause in the Constitution that says that the federal government has the right to regulate interstate commerce. And what that means is commerce that between, let's say, Connecticut and Massachusetts. Connecticut can't put a tariff on Massachusetts. It's talking about commerce going between the states. And the government has assumed that that means that they can regulate any company that's involved in commerce, which of course is nonsense. Because the federal Constitution was written to give the federal government limited and defined powers. It's supposed to be a limited government. But the government now ignores the Constitution, and I blame that on the judges. The Supreme Court has totally failed the American people. The Supreme Court is there not to interpret the Constitution, because the Constitution doesn't need to be interpreted. It's not written in Chinese, it's written in English, and it's easy to understand. The Supreme Court is supposed to enforce the Constitution and make sure the government lives within the rules of the Constitution. The Constitution is there to bind up the government, and it's not doing that. Right now, the government does whatever it wants, and the judges look the other way. And certainly, if I was a senator, I would not vote to confirm a single judge that didn't understand it.
Hey, Peter, you mentioned the insolvent Social Security Fund. What are your ideas on how to make that solvent?
Well, it's impossible to actually make it solvent because there is no fund. See, the way Social Security works, it doesn't work like a real investment fund or a real retirement fund where people make contributions and then the contributions are invested, and then out of the investment returns, the payments are made. See, the way Social Security works is just the way Bernie Madoff ran his business. The government takes in money and then spends it. And then when the people who paid the taxes retire, well, they hope that they find new people that they can take money from to make the payments. So there's nothing in the fund right now. There is no fund, right? So the system is already broke. And the promises that have been made are impossible to keep. So what we have to do is level with the American public and let them know that, look, the whole thing was a scam. And we've got to figure out a way to deal with the gigantic problem that having Social Security created. Because so many people now depend on Social Security. If the government had left them alone and hadn't taxed them so much when they were younger and working, they wouldn't need it because they would have had their own retirement fund. But now you have a lot of people who are dependent on it, but there, of course, there are a lot of people that don't need it. And there are a lot of people that can survive without it, and we have to find a way to means test the benefits and make changes so that we can take care of the people who actually need it at this point, but find a way to unravel it, because we can't keep young people in this thing. We can't keep taxing them to death. You know, a lot of the people who are getting Social Security benefits now, you know, are getting much more than they paid in. You know, they're like some of Bernie Madoff's earlier clients. They got into the scam early, and they made out pretty good. But all the loss, all the gains that the people that got in early, they're going to be matched by the losses of everybody that comes later, plus all the cost of administering the scam, because that's cost a lot of money. So the whole thing is broke. But all the politicians are afraid to tackle it. But if we do nothing about Social Security, then no one's going to get anything, because the dollar's going to be worthless. And so people are going to get their Social Security checks, but they're not going to buy anything with them. So what good is a Social Security check that you can't buy anything with? Let's say you get your $5,000 or whatever, so $2,000 check, and then you go to you can't even buy a pack of chewing gum with $2,000. What good is it that you got paid? I want to make sure that the people who really need money get real value, but we got to get out of this system. We got to level with the American public and let them know what the problems are. And one of the things that we have to do to be able to provide some benefits is we have to dramatically cut the government in other areas. You know, because we're just broke.
So you mentioned means testing as
right.
one idea. What other specific ideas would you have on that?
Well, means testing, look, there are a lot of people that receive Social Security benefits that have pretty high net worths. There are a lot of people, you know, the average person paying Social Security taxes is a lot, you know, poorer than the average recipient. And that's what it is. It's a transfer from young working people to older retired people. Well, some of those older retired people don't need the money. And in many cases, what we're really protecting is the inheritance, right? the children of those people so they can have a bigger inheritance. Well, why should some poor guy who's not going to inherit anything, why should we tax him so we can subsidize somebody else's inheritance? So we have to find a way of doing that, of understanding who needs it and who doesn't, and recognize what these transfers are. We can work on maybe raising the retirement age. We got to do something. We can't keep pretending that it's solvent. Because the politicians are just saying it's untouchable. If they do that, I guarantee you the dollar will collapse. And then Social Security payments are not going to be worth anything to anybody. Yep.
Peter, can you say something about national security and foreign policy?
Sure. I think the most important thing the federal government can do is to secure the country, secure our borders, secure us against invasion. That's the only reason we have a federal government. I mean, that's the reason that it was given the power to tax. That's the reason when they were arguing about whether or not Congress could even levy taxes, the reason that they were given the power was, well, what if there was a war? It was assumed that that was the only time they would tax us, was if there was a war. And so that's what our government needs to be focused on. Unfortunately, they spend so much of their time and energy on things they shouldn't do that they're not doing what they should be doing effectively. So I want to shrink government as much as possible so that it can focus on one of the few things that it should be doing, which is protecting the country. And that includes protecting us from terrorists or protecting us from other threats abroad, but that's about it. Does that answer your question? Yeah, I mean, you can ask a follow-up, but didn't do it.
Do you have any proposals regarding our relations with Iran?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I hear that Iran, there's rumors that they might be working on nuclear weapons. I mean, that would be a bad thing if that were true. I don't know if it's true or not. I mean, there's rumors about a lot of things. But to the extent that I was privy to real solid intelligence that said that there was a nuclear program there to develop weapons, that would be something that I would want to react to. But outside of that, I mean, I don't know what the threat is coming out of Iran that we need to be worried about. I'm more worried right now with the threat coming out of Washington, D.C. That's the real threat to my liberties. That's the real threat to the Constitution, is coming from our own government. I mean, look at the Patriot Act that they passed. I mean, that's the most unpatriotic piece of legislation ever. And that was in response to 9/11. And people don't understand how bad the Patriot Act is because they don't really understand all the nuances. But I work in the financial industry, so I know what it did. The Patriot Act abolished all financial privacy in the United States. So that anybody in this room who opens up a bank account or a brokerage firm, their bank or their broker is actually an unpaid IRS agent and FBI agent who is looking at everything you do and who is required by law to scrutinize every transaction you make, every check you send in, every time you take money out, and spend a lot of money and spend a lot of time looking for things that are suspicious. And if they're suspicious, we need to give them information to the government so that they can go to the IRS or go to the FBI, make sure you're paying all your taxes, you're not doing anything wrong. And if we don't rat you out, we can get fined, we can be in prison. That's the country we live in right now. And, so that's what I want to stop. I don't want governments passing those kind of laws and calling it patriotism. We give these guys the opportunity. The government requires truth in advertising. We ought to have truth in legislating. Because whatever legislation they pass is actually the opposite of what they're doing. Because, they didn't want to call it the Unpatriotic Act because nobody would vote for it. So they named it the Patriot Act. And so the people vote for it. Like they just passed the jobs bill. They wanted, everybody wants jobs. If they called it the job killing bill, then nobody would vote for it.